Should see Matt here in a second on the video. So yeah, thank you to Soulspace for sponsoring our food for the meetups. Soulspace specializes in craft development and maintenance as well as Laravel, Node.js applications, custom API integrations, and Soulspace created two of the most popular plugins in the plugin store available for craft, which are Freeform and Calendar. So thank you to those guys for providing our food tonight. And thank you to our agency host, Crafted. Crafted is an agency here in Charlotte, working with manufacturers on marketing strategies, branding, and demand generation programs that drive measurable results. So thank you guys for letting me spiel on here today. So our agenda tonight is that we are going to talk about hosting, craft hosting in specifics. We're going to talk about some hosting considerations, several considerations you should take when choosing a host for your craft project. We'll go over some very technical hosting requirements, as well as just some good to know things when you're choosing a host for craft hosting. We will detail some managed hosting solutions and go over what a managed host is, as well as outline some of the recommended managed providers. Our guest tonight is Matt Grasock from Served. He's the CEO of Served, which is one of the most popular managed hosting solutions. So we'll have him on here shortly. Unfortunately, Nevin was going to be here, Nevin Lean from Architect, but messaged me a little bit ago, and his mother fell and hurt her hip. So they're at the hospital. He didn't think he was going to get home in time. So thanks to Nevin for offering to come on. I'll still talk about Architect, and then we'll move on to some hybrid hosting solutions and go over what a hybrid hosting solution is, as well as provide some recommendations. Same thing with non-managed hosting solutions, and a cautionary overview of self-hosting solutions for Craft CMS. Then we'll talk about some deployment considerations to handle when choosing a hosting solution and making sure that you're able to actually move the code to the server. We'll have the bad portion, which is host and hosting situations that you want to try to avoid when choosing a Craft CMS host for your application. And then we'll wrap up with some links and a little bit of overview of what we've learned today. So let's start with some hosting considerations. So craft sites can encompass a broad range of scales and complexity levels, from brochureware sites to full-on, full applications with users and everything you consider. So there's a couple considerations you should consider when you're selecting a host. A lot of them outlined in the Craft Knowledge Base article about hosting, which I'll link at the end. So where is your primary audience located geographically? Is it the United States, Europe, South America, or a worldwide audience? How many active Craft CMS members or control panel users do you need to support at once? Are you hosting a monolithic, a headless, or a hybrid front end, which are pretty important depending on how you're feeding data to your application from Craft? What volume of content does Craft need to manage? What sort of traffic do you anticipate having, which is probably one of the hardest questions you can ask anybody for a website? And what strategy do you want to have in place for traffic spikes? How important is quickly and easily scaling your hosting resources? Like, do you need to move up immediately, or can you wait a couple days to scale something up or scale it back down? This is pretty important, or actually very important. Do you have an internal DevOps resource that can manage and support your infrastructure, or do you need to rely on a external provider? And that's really going to guide your direction in what we're going to talk about tonight. Finally, do you anticipate regular and active website development, content management every day, every couple of days, lots of times during a day, or longer maintenance periods with just occasional scheduled development efforts? All of these questions should be considered when selecting a hosting provider and also determining your DevOps stack for your application. You really want to choose a hosting solution and a provider that's going to support the demands of your application as to start, but also consider what's going to happen in the future as you scale up, meeting the future load and demands as your application and your user base grows. So the nitty gritty hosting requirements. At a very simple level, there are a few technical requirements. This is a few minutes, a couple seconds behind. So in hosting a Craft CMS application, this list is directly from the Craft website, but this assumes that your application is on Craft 4, so keep that in mind. The server requirements right now, at a minimum, you need to have PHP 8.02 or above. The recommended is 8.1. You need MySQL 5.7.8 with either InnoDB, MariaDB, or PostgreSQL 10 plus at the minimum. If you're using MariaDB, it is recommended to move up to 10.5 or above. You need at least 256 megs of memory allocated to PHP at the very, very minimum. I would highly recommend 512 or above, just to make sure that nothing's going to stall out or take a long time to process. You need at least 200 megabytes of free disk space. Pretty rare these days that you're going to have a host where you're limited on disk space anyway, but keep that in mind. And finally, if you are, and I highly recommend managing your Craft install and maintenance with Composer, you need to be on Composer 2.0 plus. There are some PHP extensions that you need to ensure that your host has enabled for Craft to work properly. I'm not going to go through all of them, but a couple of the really important ones are going to be BC Math, which is going to handle all of your math calculations, GD or Image Magic, and that's going to handle all of your image processing and image transforms. OpenSSL, of course, the PDO MySQL driver so that it can communicate with the database. And then the rest of those you really need, but they don't zip, especially if you're going to be downloading packages from the plugin store and actually getting them to install that way. Okay, additionally, there are some PHP methods and configurations that you should ensure are enabled and also set properly for Craft. Allow URL fopen must be enabled for updating and installing plugins from plugin store. The proc methods must be enabled in order to utilize the plugin store, as well as send emails, transactional emails. And ignore user abort must be enabled for the default web-based queue runner, which is the jobs that run for transforming images, clearing caches, pretty much anything that happens that's going to get into a queue job. That's going to allow that runner to run properly. Standard user or DB user stuff, most of the time you're going to have this enabled for your root user anyway, but the standard stuff that a DB is going to need: select, insert, delete, update, drop, all of those things. And there's a couple less that you don't need for PostgreSQL if you use that. Finally, I'm gonna wait for this to catch up for a second. The browser that your site editors use to access the control panel must be able to support JavaScript modules, and that's kind of the newer way that JavaScript can import export things. It's pretty standard: Chrome 63 plus, Firefox 67 plus, Safari latest, Edge, Safari 11 plus on iOS, and on Android Chrome 81 plus or 68 plus. Those are pretty standard. Those are kind of a little bit far behind these days, so more than likely everybody's going to be on the most recent browser. Don't try to hit this with Internet Explorer. You're probably not going to have a good time. Or no guarantee if you're using Brave or something like that, even though those are all Chromium based browsers, they probably still will work, but you might run into some funkiness. Craft does offer, or Pixel and Tonic offers, a cool script that you can install on your new server. It's simply github.com craftcms/server check, and you run that as a job, and it will output and tell you whether you have stuff installed or you're missing something or something's not configured correctly. And that can really save you a lot of time, especially if you're not super familiar with all of those obscure packages and all of that. Craft also has some additional tips to ensure some smooth sailing with your production Craft instance. And these are all been detailed on the Craft website on their hosting article. And these are all great things that you should do regardless of whether you're using Craft or not. Familiarize yourself with deployment best practices and establish a clean process for getting files to production and running updates, especially with Craft. And I've talked to you guys about this before. Project config is awesome. Disallow admin changes on production and sync everything from your development environment up through your deployment pipeline. It's going to run smooth. Takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you use it for a while, you're in love. Disable the dev mode setting on production. That's improving performance. Does not give those nasty stack errors if you hit. It's going to allow your 404 and your 500 pages to load if you have those formatted. Enable PHP's op cache, and that will help the overall deployment or performance of queries and stuff like that in your site. But be sure to clear that each time that you run a deployment in your deployment process. This is of utmost importance. Always use an email delivery service like Postmark, Mailgun, or SES if your transactional emails are crucial, because you cannot depend on PHP mail or send mail to work properly. It just does not work great. And once they go out, they're just gone forever. And you don't know if they sent, there's no log. Good luck. So yeah, no log. Yep. So just start from the get-go. If you're really, if it's super important for transactional emails, especially if you have front-end users, they got to be able to reset their passwords. If you're in commerce, you really have to send your transaction emails from that. So it's very important to make sure that something like Postmark, Mailgun, I did not put SendGrid in here because it's been a little bit wacky lately. And if you don't log into their admin every 3 months or something like that, their dashboard, they deactivate your account. So that's super fun. Definitely recommend either Mailgun or Postmark. They don't do that jazz. So set up an always running queue job so that all of your jobs are processed in a timely and efficient manner. By default, a queue job is not going to kick off or start running until somebody's logged into the Craft CMS control panel. So ideally, you want those jobs to run on their own when they get kicked off and run in order. So if you only run the setting run queue automatically, delays could happen if the control panel is accessed infrequently. Also, I mentioned the Craft plugin async queue, which I pretty much installed by default on everything. It'll use Ajax to kick off the queue runner right away whenever a job happens, regardless of whether somebody's logged into the control panel or not. Cache very carefully, whether it's using the Twig cache tag, which I do not recommend using as much anymore. A CDN like Cloudflare or Amazon CloudFront or something like that, or a plugin like Blitz, which is awesome, does static file caching, integrates well with those CDNs, has a reverse proxy to clear those CDN caches, or you can do a mixture of those strategies, although don't really recommend using the cache tag along with Blitz because you can get some funny business going on in there. And we've already had a whole meetup about image transforms and image strategies. So consider image transforms. They're most likely going to be the biggest performance impact, especially on your image heavy websites. Your web server, if you're going to be doing them on the server and not using ImageX or a Lambda function to offload those transforms to another server to run, then you really got to make sure you've got your PHP resources set properly. A lot of memory, long execution times, minimal long execution. You don't want them like super long, but it will quickly take down a website very quickly because ImageMagick is very resource intensive. And I can quote Nevin exactly. He said, let your web server serve your website. A web server is not an image processing server. A web server should be a web server. There's processes and servers that can handle that. Let them do their job and let your web server do its job. And then finally, use a key value store for sessions like Redis or DynamoDB if you're using those for session management. They can be fast, persistent, and scalable, unlike the common file system, which is what the default is for Craft. All right, managed hosting solutions. So what is managed hosting? Pixel and Tonic describes managed hosting as, quote, a service is one where system uptime, software updates are managed by the hosting company. This does not include Craft CMS software updates, but rather the maintenance for the software stack that supports Craft. I generally lean towards using managed hosting these days just because I'm a developer and I'm not a server DevOps person, although I can wade my way through the muck of a server and usually can get it running and everything. But, I'd rather concentrate on building awesome web applications and not worry about updates on a server, scaling it, keeping up with, patches, security updates, everything like that. They managed hosts are really great for small to medium sized teams that may not have a full-time DevOps team member or a team to manage the complexities of a Craft server. Many of them, pretty much all of them, offer 24/7 support through ticketing systems, email. Some of them have chat. They can quickly scale up your servers to handle Craft traffic or updated requirements. They handle all updates and security in the background. The trade-off is that these kind of hosts can cost more monthly and yearly overall, but the payoff in offloading your server management and not having somebody on staff that you're paying or a contractor can quickly outweigh that cost increase. An important note, I mentioned this earlier, managed hosting, pretty much all of the providers do not manage your actual Craft install, and they're not going to be willing to fix your Craft bugs. They're there to make sure that your server, and they're going to handle the maintenance for the stack that powers your Craft install. So keep that in mind. Some of the more popular recommended hosts for Craft are managed hosts, including Fort Rabbit, Served, Architect. Each of these offer slightly different host offering, but they all offer like cloud or VPS hosting solutions. They guarantee that it's going to be finely tuned for Craft hosting and performance right out of the box. So take a leg up and use a host that works well. I put a couple notes at the bottom. What is a VPS? Craft describes it as, or Pixel and Tonic describes VPS as a virtual private server. In hosting terms, it's sort of like an apartment in a larger building. A physical server is virtualized into isolated, separate submachines that carefully share resources. You can typically select servers based on what resources they're allowed, which is like number of CPUs, the amount of memory. If a host shares resources effectively, and all of these hosts do, you'll never notice or be impacted by heavy traffic on another, resource intensive. Cloud hosting, kind of different than that. It's the process of an organization's computing and storage resourcing outsourced to a service provider that offers its infrastructure and a utility model. Pixel and Tonic terms these providers as platform as a solution, as a service, sorry, just like software as a service. It's a hosting service tailored for developers building applications, and not every PaaS is PHP specific, but Craft requires one to be PHP specific. So if you're choosing that, that's one of the first things to make sure that you're able to use. So one of the three more popular managed hosting solutions for Craft is Fort Rabbit. They are based in, I want to say Berlin, and they take an approach similar to how Matt approaches managing your server for deployments and like infrastructure, in that they have Git built in and they host a repository as well as all the deployment process on their servers. So it really abstracts away a lot of the DevOps side of actually getting the code to the server and deploying it. They have a plugin, and I think it's called Craft Sync, that you basically just run a couple command line commands to move code up, move code down, move assets up and down, usually down from the server, upload assets. You can sync the database between it. When those things get hit, they pull from your local to their repo, they deploy it to whatever server it's on, and they'll run composer installs, craft migrations, project config sync, and all of that behind the scenes. So you don't have to configure any of that. You just run it and run with their system, and you're good to go. They are kind of pricey, and their one note is their support is only available Berlin time, 9 to 1700 hours, Monday through Friday. So weekends, they're usually not there, and it's probably going to be Monday until you hear back from them. They do offer what they call company plans with higher server availability or support availability hours, but that would just be the one note if you're going with Fort Rabbit. They're generally really good for small teams, individual developers looking to concentrate on their craft application and not server management or deployment DevOps. They're fully Craft 4 supported too. PHP 8, they moved up. They're one of the first adopters of that. So the next one we're going to talk about is Served. Served has a similar approach to managing the server with deployment to build in. They take it a level higher by working in load balancers directly without hardly any configuration, which is awesome. They offer asset management and optimizations completely built in. Static caching is built in with a CDN. So the level of offering is definitely higher than what you're going to get at Fort Rabbit. Additionally, for a fixed fee, Served can migrate your existing code, assets, and databases over to Served, so you don't have to do it yourself, which is really cool. And I wish I'd have known about that in the past, because I would have hired Matt to do it and then charge the client my general hourly rate. So let's have Matt on. Matt, you there?
Hello, I am.
All right, so Matt is the CEO of Served, and I definitely want to thank Matt for coming on. It is very late where he is in the EU. It is also very hot today, if you've seen the weather over there. Matt told me he does not have any air conditioning, so he said that he may be melted by the time he came on today, but it looks like he survived.
Just
Matt,
about.
thanks for coming on tonight.
Pleasure. It's just gone midnight, and it's just gone below 31 degrees C. So that's I can't do the Fahrenheit transformation in my head, unfortunately.
That's about 90 something degrees. Golly, that's nuts. Oh, they're all looking right now. Yeah. One of the guys here has his mouth just like, So
yeah, I've been
Matt, I want to talk a little bit about why you started Served, and then maybe give us a little outline of how you feel like Served is unique in the broad range of craft hosting solutions that there are out there.
Yeah, sure. So my background originally was I was a craft developer at an agency. We worked on a lot of medium and large scale craft sites for loads of different industries. But I was a web developer, like the majority of you are, I expect. And someone within our agency needed to take responsibility for the hosting side of the craft sites that we were actually creating. And that essentially fell on my lap because I was the one who happened to know the most about servers at that particular point in time. So I kind of took that on and learned about a lot more server things than I might otherwise if I wasn't the one that was just responsible for it.
Yep.
And that's kind of how the problem came about, because I didn't think that other people should be in that position where they have to be an expert in web development for craft experts, as well as being experts in server provisioning and scaling and monitoring and uptime and things like that, to be able to do that job, because they're two completely separate knowledge fields, essentially. So the idea for Served was that I would hopefully be able to take all of that knowledge that I'd built up around appropriate server management for craft and package that up into a product. And then I would take all of that work away from other craft developers who were in the same position as me. And that's how Serve started.
That's awesome. And then what makes your product unique in terms of when it comes to craft hosting?
Yeah, so the first and most obvious thing is that it is based on craft. The reason that we went in that direction in the first place is because I knew a lot about craft, and craft was growing and still is growing quite quickly in terms of its user base. There's a lot of agencies who are migrating from WordPress over to craft, and I could see the market for that growing over time. So that's kind of why we chose to go specifically with craft, but also so that we could tailor the service itself to a particular CMS and make sure that craft specifically ran very well on our default setup. So you didn't need to make any particular changes in order to get craft running well. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of built in as standard because that's the way we went. Over time, the product itself has grown in the feature set that we have on Served, and a lot of that we are able to do because we focus specifically on craft as well, whereas other more generic hosting platforms can't build additional functionality that is tightly interwoven with the applications that are being deployed on it, because you might have a host with WordPress, Laravel, and craft. It's very difficult to build an image handling service which has support, deeply integrated support for all three of those platforms. But because we're focusing specifically on craft, it means that we can build these additional bits of functionality like image handling, off-server image handling, the static caching layer that we've got, the background queue runner that we have on there that's just like a single click to enable. All of that is very tightly integrated with craft, and that allows us to build kind of the best version of each of those features for craft and offer them to you as just a one-click activate.
Very cool. Where, if you don't mind me asking, how many roughly customers do you guys have year to year?
Well, in total, I know that off the top of my head, we have, I think we've just gone over 500 craft websites hosted on the platform.
Nice. And how many team members do you have?
So there's only 3 of us, so we're a small team.
Cool.
If you use Served, you will mostly interact with me and Joe, who do the majority of the technical side. And we build out the platform, and we also handle the support as well.
What infrastructure are you using on the back end? Are you piggybacking on DigitalOcean or another like Vultr or something like that?
Yeah, so our actual servers, because there's only 3 of us, we don't really want to be managing an entire data center. Probably requires several more staff.
Yep.
So we rent servers off other services. Predominantly that's DigitalOcean.
Okay, cool.
And we then kind of layer our platform on top of their servers. But it's important to say that we don't just provision servers like DigitalOcean servers and just stick your project on a server. That's not how Served works.
Yep.
When you launch a project on Served, it goes into our fleet of servers, and it can move around between those servers as kind of needed, depending on where the resources are available, and also to keep different components of a project, which like Nginx, PHP, the database, close to each other so they can all talk to each other quickly. So all that's handled on our platform layer, but the actual raw resources underneath are DigitalOcean. We have recently started adding code into our platform to make it multi-cloud as well. Wow. So we are currently testing, and it works. I've been testing it today and yesterday, being able to pull in servers from other hosting providers as well. So we can essentially have our platform running as a single dashboard, which is the Served dashboard, but then have different servers provided by different underlying server providers feed in to that platform. So then we can have data centers in different locations around the world.
Yep.
And also it allows us to migrate our servers from one host to another one if we fall out with a particular server provider.
That's very cool. Anybody got any questions for Matt? Scaling or anything like that? No. Awesome, Matt. Well, thank you for your time this evening. And
Pleasure.
you deserve a cold one, I think, for staying up late and melting away today.
Yeah, I'm going to go and see how the temperature is in my bedroom.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah, cheers. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Thanks to Matt for outlining what Served is. It's a really, really nice platform. I balance a lot between Architect and Serve. Personally, all of my stuff is on Architect just because it's been there for a long time and I've had the accounts for quite a few years now. I have been pushing a lot more clients towards Served as a solution just to further offload the management that I need to do managing their servers. So super great product. Thanks again to Matt. So again, we were going to have Nevin on tonight, but he's got some family stuff going on. So I'll quickly go through what Architect is. They're a little bit different when it comes to the hosting approach. They also have super fine-tuned servers, 24/7 support through ticketing and email. They offer optimized VPSs for craft. They also offer like a rootless access server for Docker. So if you were running Docker and then deploying Docker images to the server through your deployment process, as well as just standard optimized VPS. So like if you needed to host Expression Engine or something like that, that's originally what Architect was built under, was for Expression Engine hosting, and they've scaled up since then to craft. The difference is it's just a server. And so all the deployment process, craft management for integrations with CDNs, image processing management with ImageX, all of that stuff is your responsibility. So the cost is a little bit less, but the trade-off is you don't get as much one-click services like Matt offers with Serve. Still a great host, really reasonable priced, definitely excellent support. The Pixel and Tonic as a company host all of their craft marketing websites on Architect. So that's really cool. They're also, just as well as Matt, they're very invested in the future of craft as a platform and the community as a whole. So it's not like they're going to be going away anytime soon. So there's Nevin. Hi, Nevin. Sorry you couldn't join us tonight. All right, hybrid hosting solutions. So what is a hybrid solution? Kind of a coined term that's come up in the last couple of years. It's a host that offers some of the abstracted tools that we've described for the managed solutions, but they don't actually do any of the setup, the configuration, or the maintenance of the server. They provide you web-based tools to quickly do that on your own. So it's kind of like a middle ground, so to speak. They're great for teams that require a little bit more hands-on interaction with the server to be able to quickly scale up or put in a complicated deployment process, or run different PHP versions for different like sites. Like your dev site needs to be on PHP 8, but your production is still on PHP 7.4. But teams that might lack the resources or knowledge to actually do that kind of work, they know what they need to do. They just don't want to SSH in the server and run a bunch of apt get and apt update services because they don't know how to roll it back. Me, I hate getting into a server and running those things. I have to do it on Forge sometime, and it's scary. So there are quite a few hybrid hosting solutions out there, as well as a few management overlap services that I'll talk about in a second that you can layer on top of these, depending on the host and what they offer for easy management, scaling, and deployment management. So Cloudways is a pretty popular one these days. I've got a couple clients running on them. They're cloud based. They utilize servers kind of similar to how Matt does, where they're moving between different servers based on what you want to select, but also based on your resource needs. DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode servers. They could support AWS and Google Cloud if you need to. OneNote, and this is based on their marketing website at this time, they only have PHP 7.4 support, which I was kind of surprised about. So not Craft 4 friendly yet. So just keep that in mind. But they do have first party like SaaS interface. So it's kind of similar to what I'll talk about in a minute, where you abstract the stuff away, but you've got a nice Webflow type setup where you can click and install SSH certificates, or change the PHP version when they do offer PHP 8. Set up cron jobs as jobs and not have to actually muck with the server. Pretty nice 24/7 support. Nexus is the offering that Liquid Web has put in place for this type of hybrid solution. They also are a cloud-based provider, but Liquid Web being a very big company, they utilize their own servers and their own data centers. So they're not actually offloading stuff to Vultr or DigitalOcean or things like that. They also have a first-party SaaS interface that you manage everything with. They are Craft 4 supported, 24/7 support. It's Liquid Web, and I can't remember, they got bought by a big company recently, last year, year before, but it's one of the giant providers. And they also offer a migration service to move your application to their servers if you are migrating and you don't want to get into the deepness of it. Hyperlane is a similar setup where they have custom tailored hosting, automated workflows, all the tools that you need with a SaaS application on the front end. They also approach your deployment process similar to how Matt does with Served, where they have a dedicated Git repository on the server for each site, so that you're able to eliminate the additional service level that you may need for repository hosting company and managing the deployment process between that. It's all built in. They also are not on PHP 8 yet, so currently they're only supporting Craft 2 and Craft 3. Just keep that in mind. And then Amazemo, which I thought was an awesome name for a company. They kind of take it a little bit farther, where they really offload a lot of stuff into the background, and they have a lot of one-click services where you can run deployments, or you can scale up or create a new server, but you really don't have as much hands-on type tools like the other providers here offer. So you can't really change the PHP version, and you can't run jobs in there or anything like that. It's really for companies that just quickly need to get a craft site up and running and just don't worry about touching the server. I can just like push code somewhere and it's going to go up, and it works fabulously. So with a hybrid solution, of course, a lot of them have their own SaaS tools that you can use. Some of them are a little bit wonky. So if I'm using a service like that, or what we'll talk about in a few minutes, which is a non-managed server approach, I always like to layer on top a service that you can kind of consider a middleware provider. And these services offer the SaaS level, where you're able to scale up the server, change PHP version, set up new sites, track your deployments, muck with your Nginx configuration file or your Apache configuration, set up jobs that run cron jobs and things like that without actually having to touch the server. So Forge is by far the most popular and well-known. It's a Laravel product, and it integrates with pretty much anybody that either is non-managed or semi hybrid, or definitely most of the providers that would be a non-managed solution. So like DigitalOcean, Linode, Vultr, Amazon Hetzner, which I've never even heard of, but apparently that's a server company that you can provision. You can run Nginx, Apache, PHP, MySQL, Postgres, Redis, and all of the goodies. And it actually goes and you just give it an SSH connection to your server, and it provisions and does all of that on its own in the background, which is super, super awesome. It's very, very worth the cost, definitely layered on top of managing that. So it has Git built in, and it can connect to GitHub or Bitbucket if you're already hosting on another repository hosting solution, and then run the deployment to the server. It allows you to specify commands to run within that if you need to. By default, it's going to run composer deploy, or composer installs, craft project config, syncs. It's going to apply deployment or migrations out of the box. It's awesome. It will allow you to move up and move down PHP versions very easily. It integrates well with Let's Encrypt, so you can get free SSL certificates that auto renew based on their setup, which has been a thing with other hosts that you use Let's Encrypt. You're actually responsible for managing when those expire and putting them back up. Forge does that for you, which is really cool. It has SSH authentication, so only an SSH user can get into the system. It comes with a firewall out of the box that you can configure. Security updates are installed automatically. You can run each of the sites on your server as a separate secure user. So say something takes your dev site down, it's not going to affect the production site, which is awesome. I have a client that I do a ton of craft maintenance monthly and quarterly for pretty heavy brochureware sites. So not a lot of resource intense aside from the images of things, but we got to the point where we needed to start moving to Craft 4. Quite a few plugins in use, so I started having to scale their dev server up to start testing things, but I could still run a monthly maintenance deployment with PHP 7.4 on the production server, and just wait until either a plugin got up to date or we worked out something with a custom module or something like that. Super awesome just to go in there and say, run 8 by default, but the dev site run 7.4. Just one click, turn it on. It's super easy. They also really, really make it easy to run cron jobs and schedule tasks. They have a nice little click interface, and you can turn them on and you can see the logs right there. They have predefined schedules that can help you kind of figure out what the best schedule to run these things on, so you don't have to do any cron expressions if you don't need to. It has a nice monitor for your server CPU, disk space, and average load, so you can kind of monitor how the performance of your server is working to see if you need to scale up or down. They have a service where they can notify you of health changes in real time as they run updates, or see that your traffic's increased and you're starting to reach maximum threshold of whatever process that's running. They can identify it and let you know that you need to scale that up right away. It's pretty awesome. Taylor's making a lot of money off of Forge for sure. That's why he bought a Ferrari, probably from the money that he makes from that. So there's a couple other services that are very similar, if not the same as Forge. I've only used Server Pilot on one site, but they essentially work exactly the same as Forge. It SSHs into your server. It runs everything that you need it to run as well. Starting with provisioning the server and installing everything and maintaining it, as well as ongoing maintenance, deployments, anything that just happens on a routine basis, as well as automated updates, managing the firewall, all of that stuff. They also offer Nginx, Apache, MySQL, HTTP2, broadly for compression. Definitely integrates with Let's Encrypt as well. So it's a pretty standard competitor to Forge. I don't know what the cost is like. It's probably pretty nominal as Forge is as well. just today, I discovered there's a third option called Run Cloud, and I didn't realize this was out there, but I saw some people talking about it on the Craft Discord channel. And it's essentially the same type of application. You've got a SaaS, you can run web application manager, database manager, service manager, file manager. All of that stuff is abstracted away from the server into a nice web-based interface where you can manage it with one click. Definitely a great level of support that we're at right now with services like that abstract away, because it really lets us get back to what we do good, which is build web applications and not have to muck around with a server, while at the same time maybe not incurring the cost of what a managed host would incur. So you could use a cheaper DigitalOcean server with Forge layered on top of it and still get that hands-on interaction that you might need with the server, with the security along with it. All right, so non-managed hosting solutions. So Pixel and Tonic describes a non-managed host as a provider that will make sure you've got a healthy machine. It's online, but what you do with the software is entirely up to you. You'll need to install the operating system, configure the web software stack that supports Craft, and everything that goes along with that. So these solutions are really good for team or agencies with dedicated DevOps team members, or someone on staff that really knows their way around a server and can configure, manage, scale, and especially important, troubleshoot the server directly. So these providers generally are a much lower cost than a hybrid or a managed solution provider. But the trade-off is that most of them, if not all of them, offer little to no support or assistance, and you're basically just buying space on a server box, and it's up to you. If it crashes, it's on you, and you got to figure it out. So your full responsibility is on the server operations. Pretty much these are the standards that are out there today: DigitalOcean, Microsoft Azure, Liquid Web, AWS, Rackspace, Linode, and Media Temple. All of them offer the same type of stuff. VPSs, can support pretty much anything you want to install on the server, but again, it's your responsibility to set that up, maintain it, scale it, troubleshoot it, and update it as needed. Many of these non-managed hosts also work well with the middleware providers that I just described, like ServerPilot and Forge. Would highly recommend layering that type of offering on top of these to abstract away if the server support, if the provider supports it. And my important note is tread lightly if you choose one of these hosting provider solutions, because the full stack is your responsibility, and with great control comes great risk, which is a great quote that my grandpa used to tell me all the time. All right, so self-hosted solutions. Dun, dun, dun. Generally not recommended. So, and I say that just from a lot of us are web application developers. We're not server DevOps people. We can get our way around a server. Usually if something goes bad, we can figure out what happened, but we don't want to spend 60 to 70% of our day making sure the server's up and running. We want to be building awesome web experiences for the public. So of course you can host a Craft application on a physical server that you own and maintain yourself. It's generally, funny enough, a higher cost solution, because depending on the stack and the person managing the server and its location, you got to pay somebody to be doing that. And it does take some time. But the trade-off is it's definitely going to be the most secure solution for enterprise applications with a team that has a fully dedicated server and DevOps team. So, we're in Banktown, USA. I guarantee you could not go to Bank of America or somewhere like that and say, hey, I want to use a Vultr server with Forge on top of it. And they would be like, nope, no way. We gotta be able to full control firewall. We got to be able to see the box. We need to know what's going on and make sure that there's no intrusion risk whatsoever. So probably not going to be building craft CMS websites for that, and they're already going to have a solution set up like that. But just keep in mind, if you go this route, ensure that your in-house or contracted support team is capable of handling all the aforementioned requirements that I talked about earlier, and the recommendations for a smooth running craft application. Most importantly, they're readily available in a crisis situation, which is why you pay extra for a managed or hybrid host, because they're going to fix stuff and you can email somebody in a panic and they're going to get right on it. And are steadily aware and ahead of server software updates, and ahead being the important thing. You don't want to be constantly trying to catch up. If there's a vulnerability mitigation that needs to happen, the server DevOps person is going to know that, because they're going to see release notes and they're going to be on message boards and they're going to know these things and be able to put them in place before your risk increases. And then you want to be able to make sure that they can scale the approach as your application grows and matures. And I put at the bottom, seriously, just don't try this at home. There's just so many other great hosting solutions that will save you so much time and so much money. Very rarely will you have to deal with something like this, but that's why I put the skull and crossbones there. So all of this talk about where we're going to host and who manages what, the most important thing with this is you got to be able to deploy the code to the server. So it's not going to do you any good if you can't take the work that you're doing and get it up there to the website or the application. So some deployment considerations. In 2022, who really wants to be manually dragging and dropping files via FTP? Not me. No way. You want to have the ability to integrate easily with a deployment service like Deploy HQ, highly recommended. This is my go-to, or DeployBot if you're using a service or a host that does not have a repository built in and a deployment service already put in place. These services use SSH keys and Git processes to pull rsync and deploy changes from your repository to the server. They also provide easy deployment tracking, which is really cool, that you can see how the stuff's going up to the server and what happens if something breaks. So they're kind of error proof. A lot of them will back out and reverse the process if something fails. They have a lot of test integrations. So if you run a test on your application or your deployment, they can run all of that stuff before they actually move files to the server and copy things over. Most importantly, those services allow you to integrate post-deployment hooks and scripts, which are really important to minimize or eliminate downtime on your site when you're deploying schema changes or installing new plugins and you've got to run a migration. Nobody really wants to forget that you do that, and then you get a call from the client, hey, the site's showing some kind of weird error, and you're like, oh crap, I deployed this, but I forgot to go into the server and run a migration, because Craft's going to wait for you to do that. So, if your deployment process can run that automatically, that's awesome. It's hands off. And going back to error proofing, if one of those processes fails, you can specify to reverse and back everything back out and just stop, so that you're not breaking the website or the application. Aside from third-party deployment services, a lot of the hybrid hosting solutions that we talked about will host the repository directly and have the same type of setup in place. So generally, if I'm using Served, then I'm using their system. If the client's on Fort Rabbit, I'm using their kind of wonky system. No offense to the Fort Rabbit guys, but it's a little bit weird. And if I'm on Architect, I'm layering Deploy HQ on top of that. In the case of a DigitalOcean server or a Vultr or something like that, then I'm using Forge, and Forge, like I said, integrates with your repository, and you push to it, and it handles all the deployments on its software as a system interface. So the fun part, hosts and conditions to avoid, thumbs down and a no-go zone. So some hosts are simply just not set up to properly scale and support Craft CMS, whether that be not supporting the stack requirements, PHP, MySQL, and all the stuff that we talked about earlier, A lot of them, if they're a shared host, they're going to lock down access to the server. So you're not going to have root access. You're more than likely not going to have SSH access on your own. You could have a terminal that you can get to from cPanel, and its user is not going to have any permissions to do anything. Full experience. I know this by experience. And their staff and their support are going to really lack the knowledge to properly support and fine tune a server to support Craft. So likely you can still host and you can still manage Craft CMS with this website, these hosts, but you're going to have to jump through a lot of hoops and you're going to face a lot of roadblocks along the way. So some of them to avoid. GoDaddy. I'm not even going to get into details. I'll just say stay away. Trust me. Just stay away. Any of the budget shared hosting solutions. Generally, these do not offer root or SSH access, so you're going to run into a lot of issues with deployments and best practices when it comes to migrations. And a lot of them, funny enough, don't support Composer. So you're going to be not being able to run Composer, and you're going to have to move files and vendor files up and down between the server. And I had to mention this because I've had plenty of clients ask, Wix and Squarespace do not support Craft CMS. Let's just say it again. They have their own product. They are site builder providers, and it just does not work. Try to avoid any host that requires you to use cPanel or Plesk. No offense to those products. They're great for simple, they work good for WordPress access. They have PHPMyAdmin access, but when you try to get root access or any of the things that I just talked about, it's a huge headache, and inevitably you have no idea what file or what ownership is on all of the files on the server. You have no clue, like what group and what user it's going to be. You run into all kinds of user permission issues when you're trying to write or read files from there. And I put Heroku here with an asterisk. You can definitely run Craft on Heroku, and I know plenty of people that do that for dev sites. The weirdest thing, though, is that you cannot host upload assets with Heroku, because the whole idea with Heroku is that it's not mutatable. So everything that you're putting up to the server just stays there. Stuff that actually writes to the database, of course, which is everything else involved with Craft CMS, is fine because you're just interacting with the database, but you cannot upload a file to Uploads and have it stored on Heroku. With that being said, you certainly can integrate S3 or Google Cloud Storage or something like that and bypass that and use Heroku. But I probably would not recommend putting any type of production site on Heroku or anything like that. Use it for experiments and dev sites and things like that. But other than that, just stay away. Just stay away, especially GoDaddy. All right, so let's wrap up here and go over what we've talked about today. Let's see, it's about 7:45. We've talked about some hosting considerations and requirements. Really be selective that your hosting selection can support Craft. It can scale, and it can respond to new requirements and increase traffic and provide the level of support that your team requires. We've seen this very prevalent this year with the release of Craft 4 requiring PHP 8 and the next level of MySQL. And you're already seeing we're in July, and there are some providers that have not caught up to that yet. So just make sure that, and sometimes you can't tell that kind of things from what you're selecting, but generally the offerings that we talked about, the stuff that Matt talked about, where providers that are really invested in Craft as a whole and really providing custom tailored hosting solutions for Craft, you pretty much can be rest assured that they're going to scale as Craft scales, and as Craft's requirements change, they're going to catch up to that and be able to quickly offer a new product or be able to scale up that product to support that. We talked about the different types of hosting solutions: managed, hybrid, non-managed, and self-hosting. Ensure that the hosting solution that you choose fits the needs of your application while also staying within budget, which is important. Servers aren't free. Services that we layer on top of the servers are not free. You want to make sure that the the level of stuff that you're stacking on top of that can support, the cost that your client's willing to go through. Does a brochureware site need, a crazy multi-level load balancer? Probably not. Like somebody that's a restaurant here in Charlotte, do they need a huge global CDN? More than likely not. So just you got to kind of gauge that based on all the things that we talked about at the beginning that Craft recommends. What's the geographical reach, how many users are you expecting, general traffic, all of that can help you gauge the approach and the solution that you're going to choose for your application. Consider how your hosting solution is going to support your deployment process. Are they going to allow you to easily integrate the process that you're used to or the one that you're wanting to move to? Is your repository going to be able to integrate well with Deploy HQ, and is Deploy HQ going to be able to communicate with your server? Or, are you going to move to Served and let Served handle all the repository and make sure that, all of that stuff can get migrated properly? And finally, avoid budget hosting and solutions that do not work well with Craft CMS. No matter what your client says, I'm already on GoDaddy, or I've already got a GoDaddy account. Cool. That's fine. You can keep your DNS there and your email there, and that's awesome. Let us move to a more robust solution for your website to make sure that it's going to stay up, it's going to work fast for your users, and it's going to save you money on the client side in the long term, because what you're paying us to do, we're going to be able to concentrate on your application and less debugging what the hell's going on with GoDaddy. Full experience, been there, done that. So generally a higher level of expectations should be the minimum when you're choosing a host for a Craft CMS website. A cheap $5 a month host is not going to cut it. And, I say that a lot to clients where I'm trying to get them to layer on, and I've told Michael about this before, for example, ImageX. It can cost some money, but what's more important? How much money do you spend on coffee for the office a month versus $79.99 to offload image transforms to a service that can keep your website up? Most companies that we're building applications for, their website's their number one source of leads. So, the investment that they're making to that website should be, of utmost importance. And I know and Chad, you deal with that a lot. It's a hard thing to sell because marketing's big, and Squarespace is out there with commercials talking about a $15 a month website, and you can do it in one click. And it's like, do you really want to risk and put your whole company, on that and all of your leads? Probably not. So just tread lightly and make sure that you're choosing a solution that's going to work great for your client. Get ready to write all of these links down. Are you ready? Are you typing? I don't hear anybody typing. So this will be up on our YouTube channel, of course. If you need any of these links for the hosting solutions that I've talked about, as well as some that I didn't really get into that kind of offer the same type of hybrid solution, like Koalo and Amazemo and Rose Hosting and Cloudsy and every funny word that you can think of, they probably all use the same infrastructure stack. They're probably all on DigitalOcean servers, but their prices range from minimum to super expensive. The most important thing with a lot of these kind of lower end client or companies for hosting for hybrid hosting is their network. Some of them are in the EU, some of them are in South America, some of them are in Asia. So they can respond quickly if your client's there, or you live there and you're working in that area. You kind of want to be able to communicate quickly with a support team that's kind of nearby where you're at. So all right, again, thank you to our food sponsor SaltSpace tonight for providing all the food, which I'm about to go eat because I've not had dinner. And thank you again to Crafted for offering their space tonight and listening to me ramble on about servers. Also, thank you to Matt for staying up late and melting away over there in the hottest part of the world at the moment. Thank you again, Matt. And thank you to everyone else for watching and listening tonight. See you, Matt.